Multimillionaire socialist Gary Lineker has made a couple of headlines this week, with his supporters disingenuously defending his right to free speech and calling out the hypocrisy among those critical of cancel culture, saying they're trying to cancel him. Well, let me correct them on that as a point of order. Lineker has cancelled himself, as confirmed by the news earlier today that he is to temporarily step down as the presenter of Match of the Day. No public servant whose income is derived from an obligatory tax, in this case the licence fee, has the luxury of free speech. Given the fact that this regressive public tax will see old ladies potentially jailed if they don't pay it, those working for the organisation, particularly high-profile on-air figures, must be neutral. Lineker's people may point out that he's not a member of staff at the Beeb, but he's a freelance presenter. Well, I think that's a spurious defence. As the best-paid presenter on the Beeb, he is very much its face. Following one political statement after another, it has been one rule for Gary and another rule for everyone else at the Beeb, who would already have been sacked by now. In their inveterate weakness, simply by being unable to enforce and uphold the impartiality of their presenters, the BBC have no idea the amount of damage that's being done to their reputation, particularly if presenters take sides on an issue which is as divisive as this one. By linking this new migration policy to Germany in the Second World War, Lineker is effectively calling anyone who supports the small boats legislation, that's over half the country, by the way, as racist and cruel. Is it entirely wise for the Beeb, via one of their biggest stars, to demonise millions of people who pay the licence fee? Now, the migrant crisis is a complex one, and numbers across Western Europe of people fleeing persecution as well as economic migrants is enormous. There is no silver bullet, but it's hardly controversial to want to end a criminal business model of human trafficking. And it's hardly controversial to want to stop these perilous crossings which are leading to injury and death. Whatever your politics, the migrant crossings, 45,000 last year, are a humanitarian, economic and national security disaster. We have always and always will welcomed refugees, but there must be due process, there must be a procedure. There must be a safe and coherent way to do it, and one that doesn't involve the dispatching of human beings, often at the behest of international gangsters, into unseaworthy dinghies, with some of those crossing, lobbing their phones and paperwork into the water and running for the hills on arrival, or being picked up on arrival into a criminal infrastructure and the black economy. Stopping the boats is contentious, but it's not controversial. And of course, we must debate it on channels like this, where it's my job to have an opinion, not on Match of the Bloody Day. Lineker is clearly a huge talent as a Spurs, Leicester and England hero, and as a very fine sports broadcaster. But his hypocrisy knows no bounds when he wails about our unequal world whilst battling HMRC to reduce the size of his tax bill, or when he enters the debate on racial prejudice by bizarrely claiming his own experience of racism, notwithstanding that he's one of the most famous white men in the country. He wails about the environment, but I can't imagine those air-conditioned stadia in the desert at last year's World Cup were particularly brilliant for the environment. But Gary was happy to fly there to present the World Cup. The most woke presenter on TV was also very quiet on the modern-day slavery conditions in which those stadia were built, in 40-degree heat, with thousands falling to their death or simply dying of dehydration or heat exhaustion as they constructed the buildings from which he happily broadcasted. And what about the shocking homophobia and sexism of the Qatari regime, a truly regressive country in which women are second-class citizens and men face imprisonment or even death for being gay? None of that motivated Lineker to sit the tournament out. And when it comes to the migrant crisis, Lineker may have support from the privileged media elite, who are all comfortably insulated from the real-world impact on communities of the migrant crisis. But he's showing himself and the association of the BBC to be out of touch with the British people. This is a problem, as the British people pay for the BBC. Let me quote top professor of politics and expert on the Red Wall, Matthew Goodwin. Goodwin has said everyday Conservative ministers are on the news saying stop the boats is a win for the Conservative Party. Our national conversation does not reflect the public mood. There you go. What a balls up. I'm sorry, but Gary's got to go.